to bring in our guest. He's waiting on the line patiently, and looking forward to having him join us. He's written a book called The All-American, Two Young Men, the 2001 Army-Navy game, and the war they fought in Iraq. And it really tells the story not only of the Army-Navy game, which is coming up soon, but about two of the players who in 2001 went over to Iraq and fought in that war, and tells their story. We're joined today by a New York Times bestselling author, Steve Eubanks, on the phone from up in Georgia. And Steve, good to have you with us tonight. How are you?
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
Well, I'll tell you, Steve, one thing about the Army-Navy game, and I go back to Blanchard and Davis. So I've been around a while and followed the Army-Navy game, not living far from Municipal Stadium in Philadelphia, and it stayed there for such a long, long period of time, and then a little bit of a conflict of moving it around to different cities. But, it really is a true amateur game. It's an amateur game played by young men. That football is important on the field, but what happens outside of that is really the story of their lives.
Yeah, it really is, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to tell this story. I had always wanted to tell the story of our heroes, but as a sports writer, I was a little limited. I wasn't sure what I could contribute, and then it dawned on me that the guys who played in that 2001 Army-Navy game hadn't gone to the academies expecting to go to war. I mean, they'd gone to play football. They had gone, they'd been recruited. They liked the idea of playing Division I football. They knew they didn't have NFL careers ahead of them. So they liked having a job for 5 years afterwards. They were going to go in and be a part of the service, serve their country, but certainly they didn't anticipate at that time going to war. Well, all of that changed on 9/11. And when they played that 2001 game at the Vet, the fire was still burning in the World Trade Center. So it was at the time the most watched college football game of the decade, because so many people who would normally not tune in to watch a college football game watched that one, not because of the game, but because of the players who were in it and what they were going to do.
Steve, what put you on to the story? What was it that brought these two young men to your attention, or did you just follow them as their football players as well as their regular life story?
No, I actually had the idea before I had the players. And I knew that this would be a good story as long as I found the right men. And the sports information director at Navy is an old friend of mine, so I called him and told him what I'd hoped to do. And I said, but, Scott, in order for this to work, I've got to have the right guys. And he said, I've got the perfect candidate for you. Brian Stan played linebacker at Navy in 2001. He gets out and was a Marine captain during the Second Battle of Fallujah, during something called the Operation Matador. He ended up being awarded the Silver Star for Valor for just some extraordinary actions. Things that when you read it in the book, you really can't believe that the guy didn't get the Medal of Honor. He then gets out and was the leading middleweight contender in the UFC. So I thought, wow, that's perfect. Guy's a UFC fighter now. Couldn't have worked out better. And then something I'm really proud of myself for doing. Once I had Brian lined up, I called Army and I said, hey guys, Navy really came through for me. What have you got? And by the time the emails quit flying around, I had some pretty high-level brass in the Army saying we really need to be involved in this. And they came up with the quarterback, Chad Jenkins, who, again, tremendous young man. He was the last Army quarterback to beat Navy. 2001 was the last game they won. Was an Army Ranger, 2nd Ranger Battalion. He was one of those guys who fast roped in off of helicopters and killed the bad guys in their sleep. So it was a pretty amazing story on both fronts.
Doug?
You kind of bring up an interesting point there, Steve. The access to those players, because you always kind of assume, what goes on in military academies. There is some access to the games, but kind of behind the scenes, they don't want people wandering around that aren't part of it. Was that difficult at all, or were they pretty?
No, it wasn't.
Let what happened.
Pleasantly surprised by the level of access that I was afforded. These guys really bent over backwards because I think they wanted to get this story out. They wanted people to know that when you tune in and watch the Army-Navy game, you're watching something special, not because of the football game, but because of the quality of the individuals who are playing in it and what they will do after that game is over. And so I think that because I was telling the story in that way, these guys really gave me probably more access than they might have otherwise.
Steve, I think when you really hit the nail right on the head, and that's if you go to the Army-Navy game, we get very, very copious notes on every game you go to from the NFL down. But I'll tell you, when you go to an Army-Navy game, you talk about their sports department, their SIDs. They must work from the end of the game this year to the beginning of the game next year because you've got every piece of information you need.
Oh yeah, you got more information about every player and every down and every bit of history of that game. It's it's like what you would expect from a military academy. It's they're very detail oriented and they're very thorough.
Yeah, just reading through the book, Steve, you kind of really give in detail the schedule these players have. Obviously, the classroom, which is tough enough, and then all the kind of military things they have to do. Aside from that, and then on top of that, they have to go to football practice, and it's amazing that they can even get all that in one day.
What was really funny is in talking to all of the players, not just Brian and Chad, but their teammates at the time, all of them said that football practice was the easiest part of the day. I mean, that was something they really looked forward to because it was a break.
Did the two young men have any type of relationship before you wrote the book, or have they gotten more of a relationship since then, or during the book?
They've gotten more of a relationship since then. I was actually I feel very honored to have been able to sort of reintroduce them. Now they met in the first play of the second quarter of that 2001 game. Brian was in at linebacker, and Chad went back for a pass. Pocket kind of collapsed around him as he's trying to charge forward. Brian's in on the tackle. So they had kind of an intimate face-to-face meeting right there, but that was it. Beyond that, I've been very fortunate in being able to sort of bring them together.
It's not only the football you talk about, but obviously really the second half of the book, which was so well described, Steve. I mean, it's almost like you were there, covering, like the old war correspondents did. Did you kind of feel that way, all the stories that they told you about what they went through in Iraq?
It was interesting because both of these guys had a lot of difficulty opening up and telling these stories, and to a man, they didn't want this to be about them. If when they would begin to tell these stories, they were always about, no, this was just my job, and they tried to downplay their own efforts, and it was all about the guys serving around me. Very typical, I think, of this generation of warrior. But then I talked to the men who served with them. They can barely get through the stories. I mean, the guys who served with Brian break down before they can get through, and they say, again, how this man didn't get the Medal of Honor, they tell me is beyond them. His leadership and the things he did in combat, just extraordinary.
Boy, you came up with a magnificent idea, and now it's come to fruition, and you've got to be pretty proud of what you came up with.
Well, thank you. I am, and I'm proud primarily because I think this is an important story that I want everybody to read. I don't want this generation of heroes to be like the World War II generation. They had to wait 30 years, sometimes 40 years, for people to really appreciate what they did, because a lot of the stories didn't get out. I want these stories to be out now so that in real time we can appreciate what these guys have gone through.
You talked again about,
Go ahead, Doug.
I was just going to say about the game itself. I've watched it probably every year since I started following football, at least some of it, and just the pageantry of it. You see the cadets come in, you see the midshipmen come in, and you talk about it in the book, Steve. They have to stand the whole game. I don't know if it's they're not allowed to sit or just traditional, you don't sit, but they're up there the whole game, aren't they? 3 hours.
Yeah, they are, and it's not just the entire game. They arrive at sunrise and stand in formation outside the stadium. So they're standing in formation outside the stadium long prior to the game, sometimes 3 hours prior to the game. They march in together. They march onto the field. They salute the fans, and then they march into the stands where they stand for the entire game. And that's the entire student body. That's that isn't just the fans who would make a regular road trip. It's every student from both academies.
Well, you and John Feinstein have certainly, John has delved into, he's been doing the ball games for years, and very, very strong advocate of amateurism and what, football means at this level, and also in the Patriot League, which he has worked with as well. And, it just comes through in his books and his comments at his interviews.
Well, John is a friend, and he was actually one of the people who encouraged me to pursue this. When I came to him with the idea, he thought it was a good idea, and I think without him, I might not have gone forward. But he was a great ambassador for this and really encouraging. So I'm glad to hear you say that. He's always been a dear friend, and I love it when he does well.
Yeah, we've had him on a few times. Always, like you said, John, a real advocate of the what goes on at the service academies, not just Army Navy, but the other ones as well. And it's such a well-written book, Steve. Is there any talk, if you can tell us, maybe making either a movie or maybe one of those kind of documentaries, 30 for 30 kind of deal? I think it would make a great TV show.
Well, I do, and we have the thing circulating out right now, so hopefully we'll get some people talking about that. Obviously, you've got a lot of good stories that are out there about our modern warriors, but I think this is one of the ones that's unique in that we're taking athletes and looking at what they have become later on in life.
Well, I think the other thing is November 25th gives you a great opportunity to step forward for Christmas gifts or Hanukkah gifts or whatever it may be, and boy, this sounds like it would be just a beauty.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'm kind of encouraging people. Not obviously I like for my books to do well, but this one's more important in that this is a story about some guys that need to be remembered, and what they did is so important to our nation's history that I want people to understand that there are a lot of very, very young heroes out there.
Name of the book is All American. We've been talking with Steve Eubanks, and Steve, Eubanks is available on all the book sites. Do you have a personal website you want to give out, or any place you want to direct people to?
You can follow me at Twitter at @JSEubanks, and you're right, it can be purchased wherever you buy books.
Great. Steve, thank you for
taking
a few minutes to join us.
I know Doug has a copy of it, and when I get back to Florida, I'm here, through Christmas, but when I get back to Florida, I will pick up a copy from him and take a look and look forward to having an opportunity to read it.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you having me on, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and I hope you have a great holiday.
Thanks, Dave.
Same
we'll
here.
Talk to you soon.